Hello, and welcome to episode number 203 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and the old hotness, and the current hotness, and the hotness whenever the hotness happens, because it doesn't matter when the game comes out, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I'm joined by my friends Neelan and Mark. Say hello, Neelan and Mark.
Hello. I think the slogan has lost something.
Neelan and Mark.
You didn't say hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Neelan. You have to keep up your cheerful disposition. Only off air does Neelan go off on Mark and I. And when he goes off, let me just tell you, he goes off.
Uh-huh.
I can attest to that fact.
I scare myself sometimes.
Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we are going to tell you about the games that we have been playing, and then we are going to have a feature topic. And this feature topic was given to us so generously by a member of our Discord, Runneman. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If you want to give us topics, if you want to be the influence that influences the influence, get on our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Today's topic is games that we don't love. That we don't love that much. Games that we don't love, but yet somehow we play them so very, very often. Why that happens, what the games are, and more after the break. Do we have a break?
Yep, we do.
After the mid-cap, after the break, but let us start with the games that we have been playing. Mark is going to talk to us about the ugliest game I have ever seen, Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden. I will follow that up with a less than stellar social deduction game, Sacred Rites, and Neelan will take us home with Great Plains, perhaps the only good game in this upfront.
It promises to be great. It's in the title.
Tell us, Mark, about Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden.
Oh, God, I just looked at this box art.
There you go. Let's get ready to strap in.
Some
Here we
people
go.
like this, okay, to be fair.
That's true. That's true. So I have found, since getting into solo games a little bit, that solo games can sort of be exciting in a few ways that I had neither anticipated or I guess I might have underestimated. The ability to play whatever you want is cool. The ability to play exactly what you want is cool. Also cool is the feeling I get that solo games can sort of explore spaces that regular multiplayer games can't. So whenever I find out about a new solo game, especially one that seems weird, I find myself getting excited about it. So that's how I felt about Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden.
You saw this game and you got excited.
Yeah, it's weird. It looks weird. I mean, look, listener, stop what you're doing, except if you're driving, and go and look up Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden and tell me that doesn't look weird. That looks weird. So anyhow.
Upsets me a little bit.
That's true. That's true. Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden is a solo game by Todd Sanders. Right off the bat, let me address the elephant in the room. In this game, you're playing as Mr. Cabbagehead, trying to
gone with
tend
the cabbage in the room.
You're trying to tend the best garden possible while being bothered by neighbors who come along and potentially steal some of your crops. In the rules, it says that your neighbors are like annoying you, but it's clearly like straight up theft that is happening. Anyway, back to the name. So you're Mr. Cabbagehead, and you're being bothered by similarly named neighbors like Lord Carrot Body and the mayor of Onion Town. Now, I do like the idea of a gardening themed game. That's cool. Refreshing. The art is also refreshing. I don't know. I would describe the art as, I guess, playfully nightmarish.
Yeah.
It sort of reminds me of like the Edward Gorey art, if you're familiar with that. Like the
like
macabre,
the Stinky Cheese Man
art. What's that?
Is that like the Stinky Cheese Man?
I don't know who the Stinky Cheese Man is, but
What?
maybe he is. The Stinky Cheese Man?
Yeah, look, Google this art right now, sir.
Okay.
We can cut out the pause while you're looking at this. This is a classic children's book for Americans.
Stinky Cheese Man. All right, here we go.
Huh?
Stinky Cheese Man. Yeah, I mean, you're in the ballpark for sure. You're definitely in the ballpark with the Stinky Cheese Man, who I had not heard of before this. Is this like a classic children's book?
That it is.
All right, I never heard of it.
I'll have to get it for you for Christmas.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Speaking of the art, I think some people will really like it. I've looked around and people do really, really like it. I found it not off-putting exactly. It's just not the type of like weird art that I personally go for. But anyway, to each their own. So, on to the game itself. The way the game works is that every turn, you draw 3 cards and you pick one of them to plant in your garden. The first card you flip over costs you a bee, which is the currency of the game. The second one's free, and the third one will give you a bee from the beehive in the center to your own personal supply. So that is the currency, bees. The cards all depict one of a number of different vegetables, and they have information on the cards like how many of that type of vegetable is in the deck and how much victory points each vegetable is worth, along with a few other bits of info. So you plant the card by putting it anywhere you want in this 6x3 garden in front of you. So you have up to 6 different columns, 3 rows, and you place them wherever you want. They don't have to be adjacent to previously planted vegetables. You just place them where you want. At the end of the game, any vegetable that is next to a vegetable of the same type scores points. So if you've got a rutabaga and it's next to another rutabaga and they're worth 5 points each, you'll score 5 for each. And if you got 3 in a row, each one will score the 5 points, so on and so forth. This is where you'll be scoring many of your points. And in the end, what you're trying to do is put up the highest score possible. So this is a game where you can get a yellow ribbon and a red ribbon and a blue ribbon, and the blue ribbon's worth the most. But basically what you're trying to do is achieve the highest score possible. Each time you place a card in your garden, you'll also pull a random chit or 2 representing one of the 5 different neighbors that are bugging you. Every third of the game, whichever neighbor has the most chits that have been pulled out will mess with your garden depending on their specific rules. So Mr. Carrot Body will take the vegetable nearest a carrot in your garden, and so on and so forth, whatever. The mayor of Onion Town will target onions, I don't know, stuff like that. Anyhow, after you've done this 3 times, so after neighbors have visited you 3 times, you'll do a final scoring. What you're scoring, besides this vegetable scoring, where vegetables of the same type will score, is you're also trying to score what are called these awards of merit, which basically boils down to trying to plant the vegetables in certain shapes. So there is one award you'll get for putting the same vegetable in all 4 corners. So if you have carrots in all 4 corners, you'll score the corners award, whatever that is called. There's one that will score you points if the end of your garden, the 3 cards on one end and the 3 cards on the other end, are all of the same type of vegetable. There's another one which will score points if you have 5 or more of the same vegetables in your garden. There's one where if you have a row of vegetables where all the vegetables in the row are different, you'll score points. So there's these types of things that you're scoring points. If you have taken all the bees from the beehive into your personal supply, you'll score a certain number of bonus points. So this is where the game sort of fails for me. So I enjoy how quick it is. It's very, very quick. It's 15 minutes. The setup is fairly simple. There is some variability in it because you can randomize the 5 neighbors that are bothering you. In the edition I have, which I think is the standard edition, it comes with an expansion, quote unquote, an expansion, where they give you another 10 different neighbors that you can mix and match so you can have a different way of scoring. It's even got a 2-player variant, which I have not explored. But so there's a lot of variability that comes in the game. I don't love that you're trying to score a high point value. That's a personal preference of mine. I like either a win or loss condition. I'm sort of playing it that scoring a blue ribbon is the win condition. So there's that way to approach that. But the thing that bugs me the most is where the scoring is. So, planting like by like vegetables is simple enough. But to score a high score, you have to accomplish some of these awards of merit. And very often, the different awards of merit will clash with one another. So, for example, if you want to go for the 4 corners, you're not going to get the one where the 2 ends of your garden each have a different set of 3 of the same type of vegetables. If you're going for the 5 or more of the same vegetable, well, then you're not going to be able to do the one where every vegetable in a row is a different type. So they clash with one another. And also, there's a lot of them. I've explained some of the more simple ones, but there are ones where you want to have the vegetables planted in a certain shape, 2 of the same type in the lower right, 2 of the same type in the lower left, 2 of the same in the center top. So it's this not necessarily intuitive way to approach the garden. Wait, what are the different shapes I'm going for? And so it's for a game that is as quick as it is, the fact that the types of scoring clash and that they're not as intuitive as at least I would like them to be, makes the scoring feel sort of unsatisfying and also confusing. Now, I think the confusion will pass after a couple of games. And again, this game is so fast that you'll play a couple of games if you want really quickly. But the thing that's frustrating is it's hard to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to try to go for this bonus at the end, plus this bonus, plus this bonus. I'm going to try to have them all work off of each other because they clash so much. So you just really have to pick one lane and go for it. And you don't get that combo feeling. Now, you're not going for combos, but it's that escalating super high score thing doesn't feel like it's possible for the most part. And that's just sort of frustrating. I can see myself playing it again, to go back to our topic, games that you don't necessarily like, but that you play again. This game's so fast and the variability is there that I can see myself playing it a couple more times, but I just don't see any way that it's going to become a game that I really enjoy that much, just because there's just so much clashing there when it comes to the way you're scoring, and because the art is a little freaky. But
do you think it would benefit more from like having those goals like be developed differently to like be sort of less, conflicted with each other, or is it just a case of like concerning yourself with less of those goals in a given game? Like, does it feel like something that could have been fixed?
I think so. I mean, I hate to say fixed, because I don't think this game is, who am I to say that the game is not designed, is designed poorly? I don't think that's necessarily the case. It's just that I could see myself enjoying a version of this game where the scoring conditions are different. Yeah. For sure. Like the spatial element of planting the plants in your garden so that they come up side by side while trying to avoid what could happen with the neighbors is fun.
Yeah.
And again, is done quickly. But the scoring is more obtuse than I like. And also even the currency thing, which feels like it could be a cool aspect where, you draw 3 cards. One of them is going to cost you a B. One of them is going to gain you a B. You feel like there should be some tension there, but in practice for me, there has not been tension there. Like the only tension there for me is like trying to make sure I have all the Bs at the end to score this bonus of having all the Bs. And even that bonus is quite small. So it's not like something you really need to go for. So it's just, there's a point of tension there that could be fun. There's a point of tension or a point of aspiration in scoring that could be fun, but both of them feel like they fail a little bit. So
there's something that like comes to mind a little bit, which was like how I remember reacting to Sprawlopolis, which is another solo game. And this is kind of, I would say, largely in disagreement with a lot of the way that people have reacted to that, which is I found the constraint of the scoring goals in that, which is similar to how you're describing, where it's like, well, if you're doing one, you're kind of working against yourself on the other. Like finding the balance of those is basically what the game is working within the constraints. But I just found it more annoying than like a satisfying puzzle. Is that like kind of close to what you're saying?
Yeah, although I would say I enjoyed Sprawlopolis. I think the counterbalancing or the way that the scoring clashes in Sprawlopolis is sort of inherent in the way the cards are designed.
Right.
So you sort of know like, okay, this card is giving me this, but taking this away. And so when you're building, you can sort of take that into account. Here, it doesn't really feel the same because it's like, it's not inherent in the way that you're placing the cards. It just feels like there's little to no chance of doing this and that. And it's just like, that's how the scoring is built. It's like, at least with Sprawlopolis, and I don't have a ton of experience with Sprawlopolis, I feel like if I was clever enough, I could sort of figure this out. I could do it in a way where like I cover the roads and I score more points. Maybe in practice that is not how it turns out. But I just feel like more control, more like aspirational when I play Sprawlopolis than Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden, where it just feels like from the get-go, I feel like I'm stifled. And not in a fun way. Again, I like games that make you feel like every decision is crucial. Here, the decisions didn't feel as crucial as I'd like. Again, because this beehive currency thing isn't that difficult to surmount. That looseness doesn't pay off in like a high-scoring potential. I don't know. It just feels like it fails in a couple crucial points. And it just doesn't work.
But at least the art's creepy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so if you've got kids and you want to scare them, that's another reason to buy this. And that is Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden by Todd Sanders.
Thank you, Mark, for your contribution to today's podcast.
You're welcome, Kellen.
I am up next to tell you about our play of the new social deduction game, Sacred Rites. What is perhaps most interesting about Sacred Rites is how it is themed, which it is themed like a bright and cheerful cult. Most social deduction games are black and dark and scary, and Sacred Rite really goes as far as it can towards the other way. The points are flowers. There is cloth bags that have embroidered flowers on them. Everything about the game is bright and cheerful and beautiful. But what do you do in the game? In the game, everyone is a member of a cult that all knows the sacred rite, and this is very important how you say this, the sacred rite of the tradition. So that could be, for example, snakes. So what we would say is everyone around the table would learn what the word was, snakes, except for 0 to 2 people who don't know the word snakes. and then everyone will draw a random tradition tile. And a tradition could be like color or sound or season. And then what you have to do in any order you choose is say the sound, meaning the tile that you drew, the sound of our sacred rite is, and then you say whatever you want. As in with the snake, could be the sound of our sacred rite is, you just make a noise. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be right, it could be wrong. Then everyone at the table has to say, Neelan.
Ah.
Everyone at the table in unison has to repeat what you just said, even if it makes no sense at all. And then everyone must share their tradition and what they believe that tradition is. And then you do a 3, 2, 1, and you point at who the person is that doesn't know, and you score points based on tricking people, based on being believable. And then the outsiders who are not part of the ritual will get to try to guess what the word is in order to score more points. If this sounds like Spyfall, it is Spyfall. If this sounds like Chameleon, yeah. If this sounds like a fake artist, yeah. There are a lot of social deduction games that this sounds like. I think where this nets out from a positive perspective, a positive note to start, is that you do not feel the tremendous pressure. Like Spyfall really hurts people who socially don't want to get into it or don't want to lie. This game, because of how silly it was and how we're going, like blue, or and then making hand signs because that could be the clue. My father really was not happy that we were playing Sacred Rites. He was in the other room and he kept, what is going on in there? Like, what are you kids doing? So from that perspective, I think, Sacred Rite is a good time. It is fun, but as I was packing up the box, I was trying to pawn it off at someone at the table to take it from me so that I did not have to bring it home to my apartment in Los Angeles. Neelan, what did you think of Sacred Rite?
I think it occupies a very specific space, right? And I think for exactly the reasons you mentioned. Like, I'm one of those people who, despite loving social deduction, can't handle being the spy in Spyfall. It's a lot of pressure. And I feared that in Sacred Rites, but I think what it does quite cleverly is through theming, through cloth bags and wooden tiles and little flower tokens, it softens everything about the presentation. Even just the repetition is, like you said, it's a softening. It makes the whole vibe sillier, it makes the whole vibe funnier, and it makes it friendlier. So it almost feels to me like a social deduction game that you could teach to your family, and in this case, very much is what we did. Well, I say we, my family by proxy, but it's very much that, right? Like, you could teach this to people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily want to play a social deduction game, or would look at the cards in Chameleon and be like, this feels like a lot, even though it isn't, but it has a friendlier presentation, and I think that goes a long way.
Mark, what
Yes.
questions do you have about Sacred Rite?
Well, I have one big question, because when you said Sacred Rites, we were talking about this pre-recording. You mentioned Sacred Rites was the game you were going to talk about, and it rang a bell. I wasn't familiar with the game, but it rang a bell, and I wasn't sure why. And then as you were talking about it just now, I remembered why, and that is because I just traded for it in the mass trade at PAX Unplugged. So this was a game that I, again, didn't know much about. I just traded for it because I saw that it was new and it's bright and interesting. So I traded $10 for this game. You would say I lost out, Kellen. Is that correct?
Okay, you $10.
Yeah.
Okay, $10. Okay, hold. Keep holding. I want to know how much I spent for it so I can yell at you. Go yourself. No, I'm just kidding. I paid $20.97. So, no, I honestly, I think you will play it and you will have a small, enjoyable experience.
Yeah, it's like a thing where I'll play it a couple times with people, or once with like a bunch of different people, and then that'll be it, sort of thing.
Correct. And if this was your first social deduction game, you probably would add like 3 points to the score that I just gave it on BGG, which is 4 out of 10.
All right. Well, I feel better about it now. Yeah. I mean, I can see myself, based on what you're saying, potentially, like you said, sort of playing it with people who aren't necessarily gamers and them getting a thrill with the thing and stuff like that.
You have to do that part.
I will.
I feel like that had to be 6 out of 10, 60% of why we enjoyed our experience of Sacred Rites.
All right, I'll make sure that it comes up the first
And
time
that
I
is
play it.
based on an abundance of experience with social deduction games, specifically with that group of people. I don't want to dissuade anyone who might want to get this. It does have a 7.5 rating on Board Game Geek, and I picked it up for a reason because people were talking about it in a positive light. So, yeah, it's basically Spyfall, but different. And Spyfall for many people is like way, way too closed off. And so that is Sacred Rites.
Sacred
Rites. I'm going to be talking about Great Plains by Lookout Spieler. They are known for a bunch of two-player games, most notably the two-player cut-downs of Uwe Rosenberg's games. The Lookout Spieler is founded, at least partially, by Uwe Rosenberg. So Caverna Cave vs. Cave, Agricola, Creatures Big and Small, Patchwork, a favorite of mine. Great Plains is the latest in their two-player line, and it has this adorable theme of being about snakes versus foxes. The game is a very simple abstract where you lay out a semi-randomized map with these 9 tiles, and on those tiles there are a bunch of terrains that get formed based on the random assembly of those tiles. Those terrains are either mountains, which are just impassable barriers, fields, which are scoring at the end of the game if you're occupying them, and then other lowlands that you can pass through. Scattered throughout the map, there are also these animal symbols. There's a horse, there's an eagle, there's a bear, and what you are doing throughout the Great Plains is placing one of your little animals, whether you're the foxes or whether you're the snakes, out from one of your caves. The game starts with you choosing caves throughout the map, and then once you've each laid down 3 caves, then the rest of the game progresses by placing your little adorable meeples, either your foxes or your snakes, adjacent to your caves or to your other pieces. If you place a piece onto one of those 3 animal types I mentioned, the bear or the horse or the eagle, you take one of those tokens from the supply. And there's only 3 of each of these tokens so that you can't just keep hoarding them. And they give you a special power, an additional movement possibility. On a future turn, you can spend a horse in order to place one of your pieces 2 spaces away. Or an eagle lets you fly over the mountains. Bears let you shove enemy pieces out of the way. And what you're sort of trying to do is just gradually move your pieces towards the fields which score at the end of the game. This is a very simple area majority scoring. If you have the majority of the pieces in a region, you score as many points as how big that field region is. So it's a pretty simple affair of like choosing optimal placing and choosing the ideal paths from your caves towards each of these regions, cleverly utilizing the movement options you have at your disposal along the way, pushing out pieces when you need to, finding the right time to say, okay, I could either grab one spot on the scoring region or pick up this horse token before my opponent does. That is almost the entirety of the game. It is quite lovely, quite good for how simple it is. You can have someone playing this within 5 minutes. We went in not knowing the rules and we're playing within 5 minutes. It is a lovely little thing to look at. The map, when it's assembled, is, you know, this beautiful mix of colors, and the cute meeples are so bright and vibrant. They're this bright orange and bright blue, and they just look, especially as they're spreading out across the board, it just looks really, really cool. I like this a lot. I'm eager to get my hands on it to play more of it. It seems just like the perfect little abstract to break out with someone if you have 10 minutes to spare.
Yeah, I think so. The art is by Clemens Franz, which is interesting because I think that has that immediate comfort on the board. And then there's no people in it. So, you know, if you don't like his rendition of people, you've got the snakes and foxes on the box cover. I did not play the Great Plains, but I did supervise one game between Neelan and my younger sister. Great Plains. I'm really excited to play this. The sort of area control, abstracty, almost go like little bit of Blue Lagoon, and then the scoring of those areas being based on how big they are, but you just have to have the most pieces in them. Has that little bit of variability going on, and it was all done, opened and closed in 30 minutes with a fantastic production. I bet this will just improve in ratings as more and more people play it, and I'm very, very excited to play this one.
I'm very interested by the pedigree of it. So this is the same team that did Mandala And I seem to remember hearing good things about that. And that's another abstract sort of game. And also, I didn't know about this, but one of the designers, Trevor Benjamin, is the co-designer along with David Thompson of the Undaunted games and of War Chest. I've played Undaunted Normandy and really liked it. I didn't really like War Chest so much, despite wanting to. But yeah, the design chops are there. So yeah, I'm curious.
That is actually cool. As someone that just picked up Undaunted Normandy, that makes me more excited to actually get around to trying that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, this may be one I bring with us to PAX Unplugged because it's so small and probably can set up and tear down really quick. I may store it in a bag of some kind.
Yeah, I think it's perfect for that. I'm half tempted to pick it up to take home with me. That is Great Plains.
If you buy it yourself, you don't have to be supervised when you play it. We are right now flying to PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia. That's in Philadelphia, right, guys?
Yep.
And if you want to see us, you can. There are a number of ways that you can see us. You can see us on the main stage with Shut Up and Sit Down doing shenanigans on Saturday at 4:30 p.m. a local time. I don't know how that translates from Philadelphia to California, but 4:30 p.m. the local time to see Shut Up and Sit Down, Board Game Barrage all together. Christina on the big stage. What will she do?
Just give her a glass of shower water. She'll be good.
Shower water, good to go. If you want to hang out with fellow Board Game Barragers, BGBers, not bugbears, do not show up if you are a bugbear. We will be meeting up together on Friday night following the math trade. So that math trade is taking place from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. in Hall C. We have no official declaration from PAX Unplugged where we can meet, but it's going to be Hall C. More information can be had and will be had on the Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. We will have a PAX Unplugged channel where you can try to coordinate games with us, try to coordinate games with other listeners. Wear your swag. We'd love to see you. It's going to be great. You are hopefully flying in right now as we speak, like we are doing right now as we speak. We are flying the great skies. Delta, Southwest Airlines, Alaska Airlines. What other airlines are there?
Is this gonna be like the Pokemon thing where you just name off all the airlines?
I can't think of more.
Spirit.
United.
American.
Frontier.
Qantas.
Business class. Except not economy.
Emirates.
Don't stop being fancy, Neelan. Emirates. That is all we have for the mid-cap, so let us move on to the post-mid-cap, the main feature topic, the featured feature topic. The featured feature topic of today's episode, once again, is, hold on, let me check notepad.exe, the games that we don't love and somehow end up playing them so very, very often. So why don't we start this discussion by going around the room, around the virtual room.
Virtual room, right.
And say one game that somehow we just end up continually playing, and yet we don't even like it that much, and yet it's always on the table. I am going to give this to Neelan, because he is smiling, and Mark is not even looking at me.
There are two games that sort of sprung to mind immediately, and I feel like this will be a fairly common situation for a lot of people. I'm reminded of Kellen so kindly saying that he would play A Feast for Odin with me on my birthday if I offered it. But yeah, these are favorite games of people who I play games with regularly that I don't particularly love, but they like them a lot. So, in the interest of not foisting the games I want to play on someone, I occasionally have to,
be foisted upon.
Yes, exactly. And play their favorite games. And the two games that come up a lot in this category are Zombicide. I have a friend who loves Zombicide. It collects every edition of it, tends to get rid of it fairly quickly, but at least for a few months will have whatever the latest version of Zombicide is. I believe the cowboy version is coming soon. And
Marvel.
There's also the Marvel one that just kickstarted. Yeah, the Kickstarter for the Marvel one is coming soon, and he is also a Marvel fan, so you can imagine his excitement at the idea of Marvel Zombicide, which I have to admit I'm at least a little bit intrigued by, because it at very least seems to be mixing up the formula somewhat.
Sounds like Kellen's perfect game, too.
Yeah, exactly. Zombicide is a game about having a lot of miniatures roaming around the board, lots of zombies, you throw a lot of dice, you move your characters around. The game mechanics are very, very, very shonky, but it does represent this one thing very, very well, which is this sort of Left 4 Dead, more zombies that you can even imagine actually represented on the board, and they're popping up and falling down as often as you can imagine. There is something that is at least a little bit fun about that visceral element to it, but I don't think it's a great game. But I will return to it whenever that group has the hankering to play a game of Zombicide, just to do my part as a good fellow board gamer. The other game that I think that falls into this category a little bit is another favorite of a friend of mine, Betrayal on the House of the Hill. I like this one a little bit more. I think it's very, very shonky. I think it's very, very unbalanced. I have games of this that go spectacularly badly, more often than not, but I still enjoy the thrill of maybe this one will be okay. Maybe this one won't be horribly broken. Maybe this one will be fun. Definitely not a game that I would ever call one of my favorites, but I'll happily play whenever it gets offered up.
Neelan, twice in your description you've used the term shonky?
Yes.
Okay, what is shonky?
Just a little bit broken, a little bit...
Is it like wonky?
Yeah, it's like wonky. I would say it's in the vicinity of wonky.
Okay, I've never heard.
He's
shonky.
hoisting a new word upon us.
That's true. Very much like him.
Yeah, of dubious integrity.
Okay, shonky, yeah. Got it. Well, as neither a foister or a foistee, my umbrella of games that I'm going to talk about first are games that I basically play mainly because they have a good digital implementation. So the games I'm thinking about are Seven Wonders Duel, which is probably the best of the bunch, Q-Birds, Happy City. So these are games that I don't really think are great games. I don't think anybody's going to fight me on Q-Birds and Happy City necessarily, but I know a lot of people are big fans of Seven Wonders Duel. I think that there aren't as many decisions as you sort of think you have in Seven Wonders Duel. I think a lot of times your path is determined in that game. Choices are forced in a lot of ways. So I don't really think it's a great game. But the digital implementation of all these games are done very, very well, in this case in Board Game Arena. The games are really quick, and so they're games that I will play anytime, despite the fact that they don't think they're necessarily great. Even though I don't think Seven Wonders Duel offers too many decisions, it offers enough decisions given the short time frame, given how good the implementation is on Board Game Arena. These are games that I can play on my phone standing in line in 5 minutes. So this is like a set of games that I will play based on convenience and based on like ease of use.
I actually think Board Game Arena opens up this question quite a lot, because I'm suddenly reminded that like Railroad Inc. is another good example of anytime someone pops up a game of Railroad Inc. in the Discord, I will join it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But like I will happily play an online game of Railroad Inc. just because it's on BGA and it's like fairly low key. And like you said, I can do it on my phone.
I think that there are some factors at play here that have been ignored by my co-hosts, namely that squishiness? No. That ease into play of just the game sort of just starts happening at game night. For whatever reason, I feel like this happens so often with Karuba, I want to vomit. Okay. Now, Karuba, 2015 game, very good. It's fine. I mean, it's fine. It's puzzly. Everyone's playing at the same time. Like Haba game that I think performed a lot better than maybe anyone would have expected. I enjoy playing Karuba, but you just sort of start playing. Like you can be like, well, we don't know. Karuba. No one has a problem with Karuba,
right? And
ergo, it gets to the table. Like you don't even know. You could look around and then you look back and you're playing Karuba. Karuba's out and you're 3 turns in and you're like, I didn't even know we were playing Karuba. And so I think that there are sort of games that fill that space where no one ever says no, so somehow you end up playing them more often than not. I think that the sort of category you guys are talking about, the best example for me is Hive, because it's also so easy. Like it always ends up in my bag when I go home. And my younger brother is a tryhard. And so when I say, do you want to play this Hive game against me? He always thinks he can beat me, which he can't. Hive is a good, not amazing for me, abstract game with wonky? Is that
Chunky.
Chunky monk?
I would say wonky. I would suggest you go with wonky. Stay away
What
from
about Chonky Wonky?
Sure, why not?
It sounds like a Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, it does.
Chonky Wonky pieces in Hive. They're the Bakelite, the nice pieces. You're playing sort of this chess-like game back and forth. And for whatever reason, I got him to sign up for Board Game Arena because he's like, oh, we can play Hive against each other on Board Game Arena. I'm like, yes, we can, Paxton. And I beat him, as it were. But I have, for whatever reason, played a lot of Hive over the years since it came out. Wow. I came out 20 years ago. Do you feel old? Do you feel old?
That's crazy.
I had a birthday recently. Let me tell you, I feel old. I got this chair because we're recording for a long time, and Christina said, oh, that's the chair to help with your back pain. And I said, things are not good when you have a birthday. For whatever reason, I have played Hive so many times. I don't think it's that good, but I won't get rid of it. Fits nicely in a bag. It's easy. It always ends up where I'm going. And other people are impressed by it. And so suddenly you are playing Hive.
That notion of other people are impressed by it is something that I wanted to bring up as well in the context of the mind. I think the mind is fine. I think it has a place. I've played it out so many times over, but I will hang on to my copy of the mind because if you have people, especially who are non-gamers, and you're just like, you don't like board games? Well, check out this. It's almost like a magic trick, you know? It's like, it kind of just surprises and impresses them with how weird and simple and fun it is. So yeah, I think that's a great example of like the game you want to show to people that you don't necessarily want to play yourself.
I also think that along with the mind, I think party games in general can sort of fit here. I mean, there are some excellent party games, and they are like among the best games ever, I think. But there are a lot of party games that I'm happy to play over and over again because they're party games and they're easy to introduce. One that springs to mind that I don't necessarily love, but I played a bunch of times is Wavelength. I think a lot of people love Wavelength. I have a problem with the downtime. I think it's an interesting game. I think it's well designed, but just the downtime is enough to always bother me. But it's a game I've played a ton of times and that I can see myself definitely playing in the future at parties with people who don't necessarily play board games. It's a well-designed game, just one that I don't necessarily love. But again, I think party games fall into this.
I think you're dead on for like other board game reviewers having games like Coloretto and Telestrations and Time's Up. These are all games that we have in our top 50.
Yeah.
Even though like other people have a hard time sort of classifying them in the same brain space, as it were. And so they don't end up like making their top 50 lists where they do make ours for whatever reason. But I think like I have trouble, for example, ranking a game like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, which is just a game that I've played too many hundreds of times. Like we're past hundreds of times. That is the game that sort of, when we do get to the top 50 best board games of all time, I have a hard time ranking it because that's not how I really do my personal rankings. And so that one is so good, but yet I am so done with it that I don't even know what to say. Like it can't be in my top 50 because I am not passionate about playing it again. Right. Please don't make me play it again.
One more game that I sort of want to throw out, because this is actually a weird one in the context of my top 50, because it's like a game that I cannot quite figure out whether I think it's really good or I just have it to play with other people, and that is Quacks of Quedlinburg. I think Quacks of Quedlinburg is like good, but I also recognize it has a lot of problems, and it's just too light and too frivolous to be a game that I'm ultimately going to care that much about. But I have the expansion for Quacks of Quedlinburg. Every so often, I hover over the geek bits for Quacks of Quedlinburg. I want to keep it. It's a game I want to own, and I want to be able to break out to play with people. But for whatever reason, it's just never going to break into that upper echelon of games that I think of, oh man, this is a solid game that I would recommend to anyone. It's a game I want to have, but for whatever reason, it doesn't rise up in the Neelan brain of like, man, this is excellent. This is good. And I can't quite figure out what this is. And this is actually something like, I think differs between Kellen and I, because we've spoken a couple of times about how we view our top 50 and how we view our favorite games. And Kellen, correct me if I'm wrong, you have no space in your collection for games that are not among your favorites.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think that there's always 50 to 100 games that I just haven't played yet.
Yeah.
That sort of color that entire framework. But I think that I have started living my life in all aspects, in every aspect. all of them, with the adage, which is sort of like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And, as we are getting 2/3 of the way through a game that I don't want to play anymore, I'm desperately trying to figure out who to give it to, literally at the table. Like, who can I get to physically remove this object from my possession? Absolutely is happening. That becomes the new metagame at the end of the game for me. But in the context of these games, when it's like, when you start ranking things 5, 6, 7 on BGG, I don't know that I will ever return to them. My board gaming time is 1 to 2 times per week, for X amount of hours. And, as life goes on, I get less time, not more time. And I think that everyone will be in a different circumstance. But I can tell you with impunity, what does that word mean?
Probably not what you think it means if you're going to use it in this sentence.
A surety.
Sure.
Sure.
That works.
Quacks of Quedlinburg is not worth keeping. There's way too much random. It's like randomness for your randomness for your randomness.
Totally, but that's also what the game is. It's like reach into a bag and hope you pull out the thing you need. Like, that's what it says on the box, right?
Except it takes 20 minutes to teach and 10 minutes to set up, and all you're doing. Well, okay, the expansion does add some once per game powers that do give you some more control over that. I recently played with the Geek Bit set with all the goodies. I did have a good time.
So
but
there you go.
No.
Where's your surety now?
No, I've assured everyone else. Aren't you assured?
I do feel assured. You're right.
I'm largely with you, Calvin, that I need to be better about culling the games that are like the 6s and 7s out of 10s. But I think what I'm trying to say with Quacks is it occupies this weird middle ground where it's not quite a cut and it's not quite a keep, but it's...
I think that where that line is, though, is most people err on the dumb side, which is like, oh, I'll play this again, and then they put it in their closet and never play it again.
do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mark, give us one more to close this out.
A game that I do not own, that I don't think I would ever own, just because I don't think it's a great game, but one that I've played a bunch and I'm always happy to play, is Space Base. And the reason that I will play Space Base whatever is because it just makes me feel, for lack of a better term, and there are definitely better terms, sort of powerful. It's an engine builder, and I think engine builders sort of lend themselves to be pleasant experiences for the most part, because you start out, you roll the dice, you get a little bit of something. You get like a little this, you get 1 point, you get 1 gold, you get 1 to this. And then by the end of the game, every time somebody rolls dice, you're getting like all this stuff. You just feel like at the end of Space Base and games like it, you're just getting a ton of stuff at the end, and you feel like you've built something. You start with this array of cards, and there's like 1 card in each slot, and again, they're not doing very much. And by the end, you've manipulated all these cards where you've got, if somebody rolls a 7, I got 8 cards that are firing off, and it just feels good. It's a game that I would never have anywhere near my top 50, but I'm always happy to play it just because I know I'm going to get that hit of endorphins.
With the knowledge that I might get run out of town on a rail, how about let's just keep up with all these different words and phrases that we don't know what they mean. I think Crokinole now fits a good spot like this on my collection, where it is still on my wall because I haven't been able to sell it and it doesn't take up space in my closet. But after the 30 games, after the 40, 50 games of it that I have played, the novelty is gone. The novelty needs to be re-waxed onto that board. But it's good. It is good. It is good. It's definitely good. But I think that the enthusiasm of just repeated plays, there is sort of like that tipping point where even when it's good, it can't do more. Right. I've seen it all with Crokinole. I've beaten the best of the champions. I've followed the one cheek rule. I've waxed on, I've waxed off. It's like, why do I need this anymore?
You've gone left cheek only. You've gone right cheek only.
That's
right.
What
can you do?
I'm ambidextrous in that case. Any closing thoughts?
I think my closing thought would be, I think it's good for people to figure out where they sort of stand when it comes to games like these. Like, you've got the Kellen end of things where you have a very low tolerance for games that you don't love. You've got a few, like Crokinole, like you said, other games like that, like One Night Ultimate Werewolf, but your tolerance is quite low. My tolerance, I would say, is probably on the other end, where I'm happy to keep games that I don't necessarily...
Well, I'm the most tolerant person I've ever met or known, sort of broadly. So
right.
If you want to clarify that.
Well, I think the way I'm sort of...
The listeners.
The way I've described it, you're the most intolerant. I have the most tolerance. You are the most intolerant.
Well, I don't know about that.
So for me, I'm happy to keep a couple more games around. I'd say more than a couple more games around that I think fit in certain niches or that I don't necessarily love, but I think will work in certain situations. So I don't think either necessarily right or wrong, but I think it's probably good to know what you're comfortable with. Is having games that you don't think you'll play again a mental burden? I get that. I totally get that. And in that case, maybe it's a good idea to go ahead and cull a bunch of games that you won't ever play again. If it doesn't bother you, great. But I think it's probably good to have that calibration when it comes to that.
I think that entire space for me can be sort of culled down to one deck of cards. You know, in some of those more traditional family weight, we all sit around and play hearts or spades or Egyptian rat screw or, you know, any number of other little games, like kind of fulfill that we're just passing the time all together sort of realm. Good, but not amazing. You know, for my family, I think Telestrations has even maybe started to feel a little bit more like that because it's the only game my older sister will play. So yeah, for whatever reason, like this is an interesting thought experiment about how your gaming tastes change based on the amount of times that you've played a game, but also the friction with which some games get to the table over others and how you can sometimes end up playing games that everybody is just okay with, but no one is in love with from sort of a spiky, fun perspective. Yeah. That is going to do it for this discussion of the games that we somehow play so very, very often, but don't love all that very much. We are flying. Unless you're not listening to this on opening day, in which case, why aren't you listening to this on opening day? It helps us when you listen to it. What's your problem? Thank you so much for listening to the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can find us on all forms of social media at Twitter at BRD Game Barrage, where we do our best to troll other gaming media companies, other gaming publishers, everyone. It is very fun to do that. You can find us on Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. If you are at PAX Unplugged, please come say hello to us. We are as awkward as you are, we promise. Please come say hello. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society Music for their song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album, Wake the Queens. So long and good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
So, you know, most social... Wow. That word didn't come out. Sacred rites.
Sacred rites. This should just go straight into mine?
Yeah.
Yep.
Wait for the laughter to die down. Wait for the pause for laughter.
You can put the laugh I just made right there, so it works.
Them a lot. So, you know, in the interest of not just foisting. What are you saying? What's like when you push your thing on someone.
Foisting. Yeah.
That's what, thank you. In the interest of not foisting, God, now it just sounds weird. In the interest of not foisting the games I want to play on someone.